It authorizes the president to essentially take over the civilian economy. And on March 16th, the White House issued an executive order, the National Defense Resources Preparedness Order, which implements that new power. What General Gov't said about it on our emergency e-blast that we sent out late last night, General Gov't's analysis was pretty straightforward, and I'm going to read that. I think it's well worth. He says the so-called National Defense Resources Preparedness Order is a clear blueprint for total government control over the civilian economy under the guise of national defense. He said that this latest outrage against the Constitution reminds him of the totalitarian world of Orwell's 1984, where a few ministries controlled everything. And General Gov't is fairly straight on and correct about that. In my analysis, and I've read the executive order. It is, of course, written in bureaucratese, and there are those who would say that perhaps there are fudge factors in it. But let's look at the actual words. And the actual words are that the White House claims to have authority to commandeer all the resources of all the people in the country, all the resources in the following areas, as specifically listed: food, energy, health, civil transportation, water, and all other materials, services, and facilities. Those words are exact quotes from the regulation. In a little more detail, Section 201 of the regulation says, priorities and allocations authorities. Now this is all about allocating priorities. And it says that the authority of the president conferred by a certain statute, the NDAA, to require, now listen to these words, acceptance and priority performance. So the president can order someone to accept and give priority performance of contracts or orders, other than contracts of employment, to promote the national defense, so it has to be for the national defense, over performance of any other contracts or orders, and to allocate materials, services, and facilities as deemed necessary. Now, that's the authority he claims. The authority to order a government agency, a private person, a private company, who knows, an individual, to accept a contract, not a contract from government necessarily, but a contract from some crony corporatist perhaps. So it's any person.
Say Halliburton.
Yeah, any person can be required to accept any contract over and above any other contracts they may have. And that power that he claims is now being delegated. And it's being delegated to 6 specific, is it 6? Yeah, it's 6 specific departments. The Department of Agriculture, with respect to food resources, the Secretary of Energy, with respect to all forms of energy, that was the Secretary of Agriculture, by the way, not the department. It's the Secretary. This is personal authority being granted to the Secretary of each of these departments. The Secretary of Health and Human Services with respect to health resources. The Secretary of Transportation with respect to all forms of civil transportation. The Secretary of Defense with, and get this, water resources. And finally, the Secretary of Commerce with respect to all other materials, services, facilities, including construction materials. This is the order. It basically authorizes these agencies to act in this manner in the interest of the national defense, supposed. And of course, the emergency is always available. So when will they start issuing these orders? Very good question. The FBI got the authority to issue national security letters to require turning over of records without search warrants, essentially, after the 9/11 events. And that authority was supposed to be used to deal with threats to national security, terrorism, and that sort of thing. A few hundred of those letters have been issued for those issues. Many tens of thousands of those letters have been issued in ordinary criminal cases. So when will the authority start? Soon. Dr. Rima, were you offline?
I was.
Well, I just finished basically reading the language from the executive order, because you have to hear the actual language, and you've seen it, of course. And I went through the list of the 6. Somehow we said 5, but it's actually 6 departments that have total government control over the civilian economy. And the question I was raising, as you were off air, was the following. When are they going to start issuing these orders? Now, we know from recent history that the FBI got the authority to issue national security letters to get information back after 9/11. And and they have, in fact, issued a few hundred of those letters about terrorism suspects, but they've issued tens of thousands in ordinary criminal cases. So once the authority was granted, only to be used for in the emergency, of course, it becomes the ordinary thing to use.
Well, I want to point out, Ralph, that there already is an emergency. On November 23rd, 2000, and if memory serves, 9, remember we were in a phony level 6 pandemic,
right,
courtesy of the pharmacy-driven World Health Organization. There was a 2-part declaration of emergency, and one part was never canceled or repealed. We are still technically living in a state of national emergency. So the
I'm sorry to say, Dr. Ruby, you're breaking up badly.
Of this chilled my blood is that we already are in a state of national emergency.
Indeed.
There's no question about that. They have all the structures necessary to basically do anything they want. And as we have said over and over and over, health freedom is part of the overall freedom structure. Freedom is indivisible. Now, tell people what this means potentially for their daily lives, for their business conduct, for their schooling, for their freedom of movement, for their ability to own a car and drive it where they like. Because frankly, we wrote some years ago about the Model States Preparedness Act, which was focused around the issues of vaccination. And under the States Preparedness Act, the states would have the power to come into your home, seize your car, seize your material property, send you to a concentration camp, require that you accept their work order, do anything that they wanted. This, to me, sounds like another terrifying iteration of the same system. That system is, I'm the state, you're a slave. This is precisely what we've been warning against.
Exactly. I'm making sure that the people who are on the program are able to, on the chat, are able to get at the information. So I'm about to post the link to the e-blast that we sent out late last night that discusses this on the chat window. And this is the access to the executive order. Now, what does an executive order actually do? Well, let's talk about that. Executive orders are binding on the executive department of the federal government. That's what they're binding on. They're not, law by themselves. They get enforced in various ways, but they're essentially orders from the president to the rest of the bureaucracy. In this case, an actual passing of authority from the president to some of his chief officers. The analogy that General Burt gave us to the great ministries in the novel 1984 is an apt one. We're seeing the consolidation of authority over the civilian economy in the hands of these 6 federal agencies, the super agencies, if you will. These are, I guess, the super czars. And we're seeing also something else. It's what was called back in the early years of the Soviet Union war communism. Lenin, in his efforts to turn Russia from what it was into a Soviet society, imposed a series of changes on that society, using crisis after crisis to ratchet up government control over everyone's lives. And one of the things he did was, during the Civil War, he created what he called war communism, which was the militarization of the civil economy for the purpose of marshaling the resources needed to put down the widespread revolt against this the dictatorship from the center. And he used a theory of controlling what he called the commanding heights of the economy through the central bureaucracy, and that's exactly what we see being implemented in this particular executive order. We see the playbook, the Leninist playbook, if you will, being played out in the United States, and that's something that we should pay attention to. Now, what we've done is we've set up a specific action item that you can go to if you go to the, and I'll post the action item right now. And Dr. Rima, you were about to say something? Excuse me.
Yeah, I was about to say that we've had urgent situations before. We have never, ever faced anything this urgent. Never. Not with the pandemic, not when 3.5 million emails went out to our decision makers, forcing them to back off, successfully forcing them to back off the mandatory swine flu vaccination. That was an emergency. This is, I don't know how to tell you how urgent this is. You see, we're already in a state of national emergency 3, 4, 5 times over. Martial law was never undeclared in President Lincoln's time. Various emergency states are continued, and this language has been prepared for. Is our government capable of creating another false flag? In a heartbeat. Is our government ready with FEMA camps that have been activated? We told you about that some months ago. Contracts were let to have FEMA camps operating in 48 hours. That's a reality. The United States military has been recruiting and training what we published a poster for, internment and relocation specialists. It's like not one spider web, but a series of interlocking, interconnecting, mutually supporting spider webs designed to catch us all. And I'm telling you folks, if you have ever felt imperiled, if you have ever felt that your freedom was threatened, if you have ever felt that the shit was about to hit the fan, not the proverbial fan, the fan that controls every aspect of your lives, you weren't even close to the level of urgency that you should be feeling now. So my question is, what are we going to do about it? This is the shift in government that we've all been fearing and that we've been seeing incrementally prepared. Health freedom is part of this. Understand, you can be told that you must work for the government. You must cancel your civilian contracts. You must abandon your ordinary job. Is that slave labor? I don't know. What would you call it?